Hey everyone, Michael Short here. Come on, let's go outdoors. Well, a really special guest today, one that he and I go back to about 2013 when I spent some time with Scott up just near the Edson area. Scott, was it?
It was Switzer Park. Yeah, William A. Switzer. Yep.
That's right. And we did a feature with some kids and a winter survival. But that's not what we're going to be talking about. I know winter's just around the corner, but Scott, you are a survival instructor, an adventurer, and now a published author. You were raised in Germany's Black Forest, which is kind of a unique transition from to come to Alberta, and then you spent some 20 years in northern Alberta, working for, I guess, the province. Now, your book, Radically Wild, shares true tales of wilderness survival, adventure, and some pretty hard-earned lessons, I do say. As I said off the top, so wonderful to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here, Michael. I love the work you do. I follow your show pretty religiously, and I think we have a lot in common with our love for the great outdoors. So, yeah, really looking forward to this. Thanks. Thanks for the call.
Where was the inspiration to sit down and put your backpack to the side and pick up a pen, or I suppose now it's a computer keyboard, and start writing a book?
Yeah, well, I have quite a few kids, six to be exact. They're all adults now. So, we didn't go half measure on the family. And for many evenings, we'd sit down and I'd tell them campfire stories, stories from my past. And I thought about my father and my grandfather, and I sure wish I would have had more stories from them. And I thought maybe I should write these stories down. I had quite a unique upbringing. And then as I would tell stories to friends and family, they would say, Scott, you need to write a book. And so what started as a book for my kids turned into this memoir. It was a long process, when you've got a career, a day job. I would chip away at this in the evenings and on the weekends. It took me over 10 years to finally get this done. But finally have the book and it's out. It feels good. It's a legacy. And at our age, Michael, we're thinking about handing over those skills that we learned growing up to the next generation, right?
Talk a little bit about how your attitude towards the outdoors, and in particular towards wilderness survival, was shaped during your time as a younger person in Germany.
Yeah, well, people wonder how was I born and raised in Germany without the accent? I can put it on if you like it. It's very easy to do. But so I have a German father and a Canadian mother. She's actually from Provost, Alberta, small town Alberta. And my dad started telling me these stories when I was very young. He was basically abandoned with his brothers in the Second World War. Europe was a mess back at that time, and he and his younger brothers, and we're talking, 5 and 7 and 9 years old, had to scrounge in the forest and in the bush to eat frogs and stinging nettles and mushrooms just to stay alive. And they were back and forth between different military camps from the Russians and the Allies. They didn't know what was going on. They were just trying to stay alive. So I think those childhood stories really took root in me. And because my poor grandfather had to fight two world wars on the front lines in France, I think I grew up thinking I'm probably going to have to go to war. That's the way it was for many of our fathers, right? Many of our families, and I think at a very young age, psychologically, I figured I better learn some skills for independence, know what I can eat, know how I can walk into the bush and just live. So I think that was a subconscious feeling I had. And of course, growing up in Europe, we were always told that the Soviet Union could overtake Germany within a matter of hours. I went to a British NATO base. And every day I'd see tanks and fighter jets and men in fatigues training. And, I had a bomb shelter in my backyard. So it was ingrained in me that we're probably going to see war in my lifetime, maybe nuclear war. And I know for people of this generation, they probably think that sounds far-fetched, but in our generation, it was very real. We would train for that, right?
So,
And you
so
probably even remember that, Michael, from your experience. You have military experience as well.
yeah, so from, I mean, I guess your unofficial training in the wilderness was born out of what you perceived to be an absolute necessity for survival. This was not, gee, I want to sit down and start a hobby about bushcraft or something, but you literally felt that you needed these skills in order to survive.
Absolutely. And then years later, when I did become a survival instructor, one of the first questions I would ask the class in front of me, we do a round table and say, why are you taking this course? And I'd hear stories like, I'm worried about natural disasters. I used to teach in British Columbia. People were worried about earthquakes or wildfires, right? Or recently the pandemic, um, civil unrest, political issues. We're still under threat of war. And I think sometimes people forget that it's a bit of an insurance policy to be able to walk into the forest with nothing but the clothes on your back and maybe a pocket knife and a lighter and be able to say to yourself, honestly, I could live out here for months if I had to. But that you don't learn those skills overnight. And I've been chipping away at that ever since I was a child. And then I think it went from that sort of sense of angst or anxiety to just a passion that has never died.
Is there, and without giving too much away, is there one story in that book that really stands out for you and that perhaps taught you a lesson that you still carry today?
Oh, so many, the book is full of close calls and near-death experiences. I mean, you and I both grew up before the age of the internet, and I didn't even really have good survival books. The first ones I laid my hand on were books from military survival. And frankly, a lot of the stuff in there was completely false, right? It was somebody's best guess on how to do stuff, right? And so I learned things by trial and error. And being young and brash and feeling invincible, I have many, many near-death experiences. I've been struck by lightning. I've been chased by wild boars. I've had aggressive bears, multiple hornets' nests. I've been poisoned while foraging. I've nearly drowned. The rock climbing accidents I've had, should have killed me. I've had deadly bleeding times, and I always say I've burned up my 9 lives long time ago. My poor guardian angel needs a raise. So a lot of these stories are in this book, but each chapter ends with lessons learned the hard way. And sometimes those are the best lessons if you do survive. And some people might say, well, are you crazy, kamikaze? No, I don't think so. And you know what it's like if you're a skier and you're a black diamond skier, you don't want to play on the green slopes all day, right? You want to push yourself, maybe go on a double black diamond. And I see the same way with bushcraft and survival. I was always trying to push myself to the next level. And I would go out in the bush and sometimes take no food, maybe no fire, maybe no pocket knife, maybe no sleeping bag, head out in the snow. Could I do it? And you come pretty close to the edge of your resilience and your knowledge and ability. But if you do survive, and when you do survive, you come out of that experience learning a lot of things, and then you can pass that on to the next generation or to your students in the course, right?
So that's interesting. It's where does it become an adventure and where does that adventure become, oh boy, I'm in trouble due to lack of planning or due to not understanding the situation to the level that you should be understanding it?
Yeah, I get that's a very good question. I come back to that issue of the edge, right? So the greatest growth always happens at the edge of our ability. And I would say because I've made a lifetime of this. I've gone out thousands of times, hundreds of times in different scenarios, and most of them you come back and you have a fun story. You did this and that. You learned to eat this and that, and I've eaten everything under the sun. We can talk about that later. But but sometimes nature has a twist. You get up in the mountains, you weren't expecting a lightning storm. Maybe you're rock climbing and you're at your ability, but that handhold breaks off, or your protection that you put in with the trad climb breaks out. I mean, stuff happens. We all know, right? Maybe you're ice fishing. Maybe the ice is thinner than you thought. So I wouldn't say I ever headed out in a crazy haphazard way, but I always headed out trying to push the limit. And sometimes you tip over that tightrope walk, right? You're walking that fine edge. And that's when you come back, they make for the most exciting stories, right?
You've spent, as I said, some 2 decades with the province, working in various scenarios. Over your time, Scott, how have you noticed, or maybe it hasn't changed, but people's perception of being in, whether it be wild areas or provincial parks, their attitude towards it, has it changed? Have you noticed any kind of a trend?
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk about front country and back country a lot in the park system. And the vast majority of people are front country campers, and nothing wrong with that. So they want to pull up with their RV or maybe a tent. They want a shower, amphitheater show, some flush toilets, that sort of thing, the comforts of life. And that's fine. Everybody needs to experience nature in their own way. But there's also, especially in the Northern Rockies here, we have places like Wilmore Wilderness and Rock Lake Solomon Wildland and Whitehorse Wildland, which even a lot of Albertans don't even know about. People know about Banff and Jasper, but along the same mountain ranges, you have these spectacular wilderness parks where it's like going back in time. I say, if you ever step foot in a wildland park or Wilmore Wilderness, you feel like you've stepped back pre-contact. We have no bridges there. There are no, and in many of these places, there aren't even standard campsites or bear poles. And, the signage might not be great. So you're really on your own in grizzly country, crossing rivers, hiking mountains. And for me, I love that. The more rugged, the better. The reason I bring that up is so we got your front country camper, but there's also this drive for people to have that more extreme experience. I think where we do have a gap is what I call mid-country camping. How do you go from being a front country camper one day to walking straight out into the wilderness for 50 kilometers for multiple days and getting your own drinking water and watching out for grizzly bears and knowing how to hang your food for bears? Um, there's got to be a stepping stone in between. And I think in my career, I've looked at ways that we can do a better job of that, ease people into the backcountry.
You've also expanded your I guess outreach of communication through a podcast. You have the Wilderness Wavelength podcast that you co-host. How is that? Did that? I mean, with the people that you talk to and that type of thing, did that have any influence on you when you came to writing this book? Did you take some antidote from someone and adapt it into maybe one of your own exploits?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say iron sharpens iron, and in the book, there's so many stories of friends and colleagues. Um, some of the stuff is solitude, but I've got a story in there. Randy Kadatz, I think you've met him, the conservation officer in Hinton. He's been there forever. We have a story where we went out to deal with two tangled whitetail bucks, and he brought a lasso with him. And I said, "What are you going to do with that?" He said, "I don't know. We got to figure this out." Both of us had never learned this in our wildlife courses. So we found these monster bucks, and they're just fighting and tangled and dragging each other and bleeding. and we knew that we couldn't lasso them. So Randy pulls out his shotgun, and I thought, well, that's a little extreme, Randy. I thought he was going to shoot one to save the other. And I whispered to him, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to shoot off an antler." I said, "You're going to do what?" And he says, "I'm going to shoot off an antler and free them." And I'm like, okay, that's pretty ballsy. So he crept up to the whitetail bucks. Now, keep in mind, he doesn't have a scope on this. These are iron sights on a shotgun with a slug. And sure enough, at 20 yards or 60 feet, he blows an antler off. So he had to hit, the size of a loony or a toonie, freehand like that. And so there's stories like that in the book of people that I definitely admire, people that I've learned from. And I wouldn't be where I am in my career or in my wilderness skills without rubbing shoulders with some of these people.
Scott, where can folks find it? It strikes me as the perfect Christmas gift for those that maybe have someone interested in this area.
Absolutely. The book has only been released for the last 2 weeks or so, so it's slowly coming out on places like Kindle and Amazon and ebooks. It's on Google, Apple Books. I think there's places I don't even know where it is. I'm kind of stumbling through this publishing world myself. But the cheapest place you can buy it is at Friesen Press. And Friesen Press is a Canadian company, so support local. And you can get an ebook there. You can get paperback and hard copy. So go to Friesen Press Bookstore online and look it up. That would be fantastic. And within 1 week, it came on the Friesen Press bestseller list. So I was pretty stoked to see that. So people are picking it up.
Well, I looked up the story that you and I did. That was back in 2013. Let's not let that much time pass before we
Yeah.
connect again, Scott. Thanks so much for this. It was just a hoot, and what a great adventure you've been on, and thanks for capturing those memories and capturing those stories and putting them down in paper because I think they're going to hit with folks right across the world who have an interest in being in the outdoors.
Well, thank you, Michael. And again, I'll say it. I love your show, and I love that you've devoted so much of your life to getting people outdoors. And I think in many ways that is the main vision mission of this book, Radically Wild, is just to get people to connect with nature again. And it might look different for everybody, but for heaven's sake, get outside, get outdoors, enjoy nature. It's good for the soul, it's good for the psyche, and it's a healthy way of living.